Hi poetry lovers, welcome to my channel Bella Poetry Presents. My name is Bella and I love beautiful poetry. I not only introduce my listeners to the most wonderful poets from around the world, but I also write poetry. So please check out my book that is sold at store@bookbaby.com titled Love, Life, and Other Dilemmas. I'm sure you'll identify with a lot of poems and you will enjoy it. So today, in our last segment of the second series, The Best Love Poetry and the Poets That Penned It, we will talk about another American poetess who unfortunately had a very short life. Her name is Sylvia Plath. Sylvia Plath was born on October 27, 1932 in Boston, Massachusetts. Her mother, Aurelia, was a second-generation American of Austrian descent, and her father, Otto Plath, was from Grabow, Germany. Plath's father was an entomologist and a professor of biology at Boston University, and he wrote a book about bumblebees. On April 27, 1935, brother Warren was born, and in 1936 the family moved to 92 Johnson Avenue in Winthrop, Massachusetts. While living in Winthrop, 8-year-old Sylvia published her first poem in the Boston Herald children's section. Over the next years, Plath published multiple poems in regional magazines and papers. And at age 11, Sylvia started keeping a journal. In addition to writing, she showed an early promise as an artist, winning an award for her paintings from the Scholastic Art and Writing Awards in 1947. Even when Sylvia Plath was very young, she was ambitiously driven to succeed. Unfortunately, something happened when Sylvia turned 8 years old, like a week and a half before her birthday. Her dad, Otto Plath, passed away. He died after the operation on his foot due to undiagnosed and untreated diabetes condition. And Sylvia Plath was extremely upset about his death. She felt that her father had betrayed her because he died. Her relation with her dad was very complicated. He was very authoritarian father, but at the same time, she loved him dearly. And she dedicated a poem, Daddy, a famous poem of hers, Daddy, that talks about the conflict in this relationship. And after her father passed away, Sylvia Plath kind of sunk into depression. That's when her depression started. Even a few times she self-harmed herself. When she was 11 and then 14 years old, she cut her arm and even cut her throat, but was saved. Plath's relationship with her mother was also extremely complicated. On one hand, she was very, very close to her, but on the other hand, she wrote many times that she hated her. However, despite her problematic relationship with her parents and her struggles with depression, Sylvia Plath continued to excel academically. She was a very gifted student with an IQ of 160, and she won numerous awards and had published stories and poetry in national magazines while still in her teens. Now, financial circumstances after the death of her father forced her family to move to Wellesley, Massachusetts. There, Aurelia Plath taught advanced secretarial studies at Boston University to support her family. So Plath attended Bradford Senior School in Wellesley, and she graduated in 1950. Just after graduating from high school, she had her first national publication in the Christian Science Monitor. In 1950, Plath started to attend Smith College, a private women's liberal arts college in Massachusetts, and she also edited the Smith Review. After her third year of college, Plath was awarded a coveted position as a guest editor at Mademoiselle magazine, and she spent 1 month in New York. She moved to New York in the summer of 1953. The experience was not what she hoped for. She described her experience as pain, parties, and work. Many of the events that took place in New York during this summer were later kind of inspired her story in her only novel that she published called The Bell Jar. She had a mental breakdown following a rejection from a Harvard writing program, and she attempted suicide at the age of 20 in August 1953. She crawled under the front porch and took her mother's sleeping pills, but luckily she survived this first suicide attempt. And she later described it as blissfully succumbing to the whirling blackness that I honestly believed was eternal oblivion. As a result, she spent 6 months in a psychiatric hospital receiving electric and insulin shock treatments. Plath seemed to make a good recovery and she returned to college. In 1955, she graduated from Smith College. She obtained a Fulbright scholarship to study at Newnham College in Cambridge, England, one of the 2 women-only colleges of the University of Cambridge in England, where she continued actively writing poetry and publishing her work in the student newspaper Varsity. Plath met poet Ted Hughes, who later became her husband, on February 25th, 1956. And in 1961, she described this meeting in the BBC interview. I've read some of Ted's poems in the magazine and I was very impressed and I wanted to meet him. I went to this little celebration and that's actually where we met. Then we saw a great deal of each other. Ted came back to Cambridge and suddenly we found ourselves married a few months later. We kept writing poems to each other. Then it just grew out of that. I guess a feeling that we both were writing so much and having such a fine time doing it, we decided that this should keep on. Plath also described Hughes as a singer, storyteller, lion, and world wanderer with a voice like the thunder of God. So you can tell that she was really, really taken by him and was in love with him. The couple married on June 16, 1956 at St. George the Martyr, Holborn in London, with Plath's mom in attendance. They spent their honeymoon in Paris. During the first year of marriage, Plath often wrote to her mother about him. I really am convinced that he is the only person in the world I could ever love. Plath returned to Newnham College in October to begin her second year. During this time, they both became deeply interested in astrology and supernatural. In June 1957, Plath and Hughes moved to the United States, and from September, Sylvia Plath taught at Smith College. But she found it very difficult to both teach and have enough time and energy to write. So, in the middle of 1958, the couple moved to Boston. Plath took a job as a receptionist in the psychiatric unit of Massachusetts General Hospital, and in the evening sat in on creative writing seminars given by poet Robert Lowell. Lowell encouraged Plath to write from her experience, and she did so. The couple moved back to England in December 1959 and lived in London at 3 Chalcot Square near the Primrose Hill area of Regent's Park. Their daughter Frida was born on April 1960, and in October, Plath published the Colossus, her first collection of poetry. In February 1961, Plath's second pregnancy ended in miscarriage. In a letter to her therapist, Plath wrote that Hughes beat her 2 days before the miscarriage. Their relationship was very tumultuous and passionate. There were two creative geniuses working together, writing together for 6 years. Hughes helped Plath develop her voice in writing, but at the same time, they faced many challenges, and Plath did accuse Hughes of physically abusing her sometimes. In 1961, Plath began to write The Bell Jar, her only published novel. It was based on her own life and experience with mental illness. Immediately after this, the family moved to Court Green in the small market town of North Taunton. Nicholas was born in January 1962. In mid-1962, Plath and Hughes began to keep bees, which will be the subject of many of her poems. Let's not forget that her father wrote a book about bumblebees. In August 1961, the couple rented their flat at Chalcot Square to Asia. Hughes was immediately struck with the beautiful Asia as she was with him. And in June 1962, Plath had a car accident which she described as one of many suicide attempts. She basically crashed her car. And then on top of it, in July 1962, she found out that her husband, Ted Hughes, was having an affair with Asia Wevel. In September, Plath and Hughes separated. Beginning in October 1962, Plath experienced a great burst of creativity, and she wrote most of her poems on which her reputation now rests. Writing at least 26 of her poems of her posthumous collection, Ariel, during the final months of her life. The December 1962 was very, very cold. Plath returned alone to London with her children and rented on a 5-year lease a flat at 23rd Fitzroy Road, only a few streets from Chalcot Square flat. The northern winter of 1962 and 1963 was one of the coldest in 100 years. The pipes froze. Her children, now 2 years old and 9 months old, still babies, were constantly sick. The house had no telephone. Her depression returned, but she completed her poetry collection, Ariel, sometimes writing 2 to 3 poems a day. Her only novel, The Bell Jar, was published in January 1963. She published it under the pen name Victoria Lucas. And unfortunately, this novel was met with very cold critical reviews. The critics were quite indifferent to its publication. Sylvia also suffered at that time from relentless flu. She was also extremely bitter about the affair of her husband and the dissolution of her marriage. So now we have all these components brought together. Her children are sick, she has a flu, she's not well, she's depressed, she's bitter about the divorce, she's bitter about Hugh's affair, and so forth. In January 1963, Plath spoke with her general practitioner, Dr. John Porter, and she told him about her depression. She said that her depression was ongoing for 6 to 7 months already. While for most of the time she was able to continue working, her depression has worsened and became quite severe. It was marked by constant agitation, suicidal thoughts, and inability to cope with daily life. Plath struggled with insomnia, taking medication at night to induce sleep, and frequently waking up very early. She lost 20 pounds. Porter prescribed her the antidepressant a few days before her suicide. Knowing that she was at risk, or she was putting at risk the 2 little children that lived with her, he visited her daily and made efforts to have her admitted to the hospital, but she refused. So he arranged for a live-in nurse for her. On the morning of February 11, 1963, the nurse was due to arrive at 9 o'clock in the morning to help Plath to take care of the children. When she arrived, she started knocking on the door, but nobody opened the door. Luckily, there was a workman named Charles Langridge, and he had a key. He helped her open the door to Plath's apartment, and they found Sylvia Plath dead with her head in the oven. She sealed the rooms between her and her sleeping children with tape, towels, and cloth. She was only 30 years old. Her family, ashamed of her suicide, reported that she died of pneumonia. An inquest was held on February 15th and gave a ruling of suicide as a result of carbon monoxide poisoning. Hughes, when he found out about the death of Sylvia Plath, was devastated. They were separated for 6 months due to his affair with Asia. In a letter to an old friend of Plath from Smith College, he wrote, "That's the end of my life. The rest is posthumous." Asia, unfortunately and kind of strangely, also committed suicide, and not only committed suicide, but killed her only daughter with Hughes. She drowned her in a bathtub. So very, very sad story. It happened 6 years later. Hughes inherited Plath's unpublished manuscripts, appointed himself her editor, and made her famous. Shortly before his death, in 1998, Hughes released 2 books of poetry that explored the subject of what it meant to be Sylvia Plath's husband. In 1965, when he brought out the volume titled Ariel, which contained Sylvia Plath's last work, he said, "This is just like her, but permanent." In 1982, Sylvia Plath was awarded the posthumous Pulitzer Prize. Today, she is considered one of the greatest female American poets of the 20th century. Plath's daughter, Frida Hughes, is a writer and an artist just like her mother. On March 16, 2009, unfortunately, Plath's son, Nicholas Hughes, hanged himself at his home in Fairbanks, Alaska, from a history of depression. And so today we will read a couple of her quotes and a couple of her poems, love poems. The first quote: remember this is now and now and now. Live it, feel it, cling to it. I want to become acutely aware of all I've taken for granted. So kind of ironic quote considering the fact that she committed suicide. And the second quote is, I took a deep breath and listened to the old bray of my heart. And we will read a couple of her poems. The first poem is called Cinderella. The prince leans to the girl in scarlet heels, her green eyes slant, hair flaring in a fan of silver as the rondo slows. Now reels begin on tilted violence to span the whole revolting tall glass palace hall, where gas slide gliding into light like wine. Rose candles flicker on the lilac wall, reflecting in a million flagons shine. And glided couples, all in a whirling trance, follow holiday revel begun long since, until near 12, the strange girl all at once, guilt-stricken holds, pales, clings to the prince, and amid the hectic music and cocktail talk, she hears the caustic ticking of the clock. Cinderella, that was her poem Cinderella. And the second poem is a very famous poem of Sylvia Plath. It's called A Mad Girl's Love Song. I shut my eyes and all the world drops dead. I lift my lids and all is born again. I think I made you up inside my head. The stars go waltzing out in blue and red. An arbitrary blackness gallops in. I shut my eyes and all the world drops dead. I dreamed that you bewitched me into bed and sung me moonstruck, kissed me quite insane. I think I made you up inside my head. God topples from the sky, hell spires fade, exits seraphim and Satan's men. I shut my eyes and all the world drops dead. I fancied you returned the way you said, but I grow old and I forget your name. I think I made you up inside my head. I should have loved a thunderbird instead. At least when spring comes, they roar back again. I shut my eyes and all the world drops dead. I think I made you up inside my head. Two beautiful poems. And with this poem, we come to the end of this segment that presented to you a story and a beautiful poetry of Sylvia Plath. And this is the end of our second session about the past love poets and the poems and the poets that penned it. In our next segment, we will start a new series and we will discuss wonderful Russian poets of the Silver Age. Please join us. Thank you so much for listening. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. Your support is extremely important to us. Have a wonderful, wonderful day. Bye-bye.